the gist of it and can work with you. So in the end, I just say, it's good to build hackerspaces, but I also appreciate Nauticon as a place where I can come as a non-geek, hold forth on this sort of thing, and try and bridge that gap. So I'll leave it at that. And are there any questions? If there are, if there's a microphone up here you can use. Do you want to come up, or you can just shout it out?
I think I can follow.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
One of the responses, especially in the last 10 years, to the increase of technology seems to be giving up, retreating to simple and maybe older truths.
Yeah.
And rejecting technology and actually saying that it's dangerous and perhaps evil.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that?
That was actually something that I did think about in writing this. That was one of the other aspects of what I called sort of the prime directive response. Is I study conflict. It's my postgraduate work and religious conflict in particular. So I was looking at the modern terrorism. You'll have people who oppose modern society, high level of education, that sort of thing. People who have the technical smarts. Terrorists are not dumb people to pull off some of the stuff they do. But they do not, I think, value the broad-based education that I was talking about. So if you were to go to Afghanistan, they were just cutting the legs right out from under themselves because they were destroying the foundations of an educated society that it takes to have people who could fight the battles that they were wanting to fight. And I thought that was quite an interesting thing. And that was where I first thought of the whole prime directive idea that, maybe these people shouldn't have that sort of technology. They're using cell phones and whatnot that their own worldview would not allow to be created, and they're using this technology to harm people. And apart from it doesn't work unless you're in Star Trek, where you can just observe a planet from a distance and say, oh, they don't have warp technology, we're not going to go down there. We're all intermixed in the world. People are going to get technology somehow, so there's no way of denying it to people. So I think the answer is, I think it does go back to what I was saying, is telling your story, is that, yeah, the more complex technology gets, even though it's in your hand, even though you can have a laptop sitting right there that has a lot of computing power compared to what we've had through the vast history of humanity, it's getting so complex that people are beginning to just not want to understand it. And I think a lot of that has to do with the story isn't being told well. And I mean not the story of the history of how it was created, but the emotive story, the kernel truth that underlies a society's self-knowledge, why technology is important. So it's part to do with telling the story, but also I think part to do with general education. That's where you have to sit down and fight. So this draws in the politics of education. If people oppose scientific knowledge based on their personal or their communal view, not even personal, their communal view of, say, the creation of the world, while the issue isn't specifically about technology, so that, okay, so we overlook evolution, we're not going to talk about it in the classroom. People will still teach the kids how to use computers. You are, taking from these kids knowledge of science generally, which leaves them less able to cope with the technology as it comes. So that's one of a specific point of getting involved and promoting science education, getting behind people who are, saying, yes, we have to teach evolution. Because there are religious people who are for the teaching of evolution. They respect the science. They say, yeah, our view has to do with person's inner and spiritual life, but the evidence is incontrovertible. Even the Pope has come out and said, oh yeah, evolution's scientific fact. I'm the Pope. I talk about other stuff. So, you can even work with religious people. It doesn't have to be this sort of us and them divide between those who know and those who don't. But it does have to be when you see somebody coming in and saying, oh, we shouldn't teach kids that. Anytime somebody says, oh, we shouldn't teach kids that, you got to say, why? If you're not teaching somebody something, you're cutting off an aspect of knowledge, which means that later they're just not going to be as interested in stuff generally. So that was a long-winded kind of roundabout explanation, but hope it answered the question. Are there any other questions, comments people want to make? Yeah.
Okay, first off, I can agree with you on the...
Yeah, is that one on?
Well,
Is this switch on?
yes. All right, I can agree with you on the whole everybody needs education thing.
There you go.
Definitely.
It's a bit low.
Come up. All right, but I feel weird. All right, but I already forgot what I was going to talk about. I can agree with the education, but I forgot what I was going to talk about now.
Yeah, all that trouble with the microphone.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember.
What was it like? What did it involve?
It was. I agree with the education thing. Everybody needs education. We can't cut that off. But do you think it could be argued that, or it might not even be argued, but everybody needs this point of view? I'd have to say, and not just the geeks or us nerdy people being flexible to the people who aren't nerdy. And
Oh,
geeky,
well, yeah.
But everybody kind of has to have that flow together.
Yeah.
To
Well,
be
that's what I'm saying about education generally. It's one thing to teach tech education and science education. And so that was like the first half of my thing was telling the hacker story better. But yeah, if people aren't receptive to it, if it's not going to be a two-way street, I'm not going to ask you to do that. Why bother, going out of your way trying to explain stuff to people if they don't want to listen? So that's why I was talking about education just as a general principle. And I mean education outside of, I'm talking about promoting arts education, music, things that just get any kid interested so that they like thinking and they like doing stuff. And so even if they're not in, if even they don't get into science, even vaguely, let alone, the hacker type scene specifically, they still respect what goes on, and they say, "Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't know how to do it, but I respect those that do." If that was your sort of point, that it has to be a two-way street, I definitely agree.
Those doctors need to be able to come to us and
Yeah.
do what we do to them the same way.
Yeah.
Kind of
Well,
explain
yeah.
to me, but don't go into the details.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what Lisa does, my fiancée. That she's a pediatrician, so she deals with kids who she can't explain the details of what she's doing. But kids are often quite receptive. She actually likes being a pediatrician because she doesn't like dealing with adults so much. Because with adults, they try and hide what they're doing, and she in her residencies when she was just walking around, I think that it was general practice. She was talking to this woman and asking her the checklist of stuff, and said, "Do you smoke?" And the woman's like, "Oh no, I don't smoke." And she had a pack of cigarettes in her front pocket, and Lisa's like, "Dude, at least try to lie to me, in a better way than that if you're gonna." Kids apparently don't do that thing so much. If you ask them, honestly, tell me, are you taking your medication? It's okay if you're not. I just need to know. They say, no, I'm not. And so there's sort of an inherent respect there that you get from kids. But I think that's one of the things that everyone always asks about education is how do we keep that sort of honesty that kids might have when people grow up? Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But I think it's supporting general education. It's just keeping people interested in life, in stuff, so that, when you end up talking to them, they don't need to know the details, just like you don't need to know the details of your medical treatment, but you are smart enough to figure out vaguely that if somebody, if you're coming in for a broken bone and they're giving you something else, you're like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here? Similarly, plenty of non-geeks out there aren't going to get the stuff, but they have to at least respect you enough to trust what you're saying and understand the gist of it. Go, oh, I see how this works. So yeah, I agree. Any other comments, questions, that sort of thing? Yeah.
I have a suggestion for how the non-geeks can interact better with geeks, and that's to learn how to ask questions and to stick with problems instead of solutions. I have an example. One time I had a guy, a non-geek, ask me, tell me, I went to the scanner and OCR software so I can scan my passage. And I was this close to actually doing it before I decided to ask the question why I want that. And
Yeah. Just as an aside, that I mostly here I was talking about what geeks can do to talk to non-geeks better, because I'm here. So I was trying to cater to the audience. But you're right. If I were to be talking to a room of the non-tech people, there'd be a lot of stuff like that I'd say, which would be, explain what it is that you want. Admit that you don't understand it, because that's fine. And work with, and then you're working with somebody who knows how these things work, and say what you want rather than, oh, here, do this for me. I think that's what Blake Ross did. He actually went out of his way to ask people. But if we could encourage that sort of mentality, that people complain about their email or their whatever all day, but don't do anything about it because they don't think there's really a solution. They just think that it sucks. Sometimes it takes somebody asking them before they go, oh, wait, I would like it if it did this. And then you go, oh, I can do that for you. Or in fact, if you just go over here, that service is already implemented. If that were, again, I point to education. And that actually gets back to, although I say, oh, it doesn't have to be sci-tech education, it should be sci-tech education. If you teach people how to think, they're going to ask better questions. They're going to be more, issue-focused rather than solution. Oh, instead of do this, they're going to, ask you what they can do. I hope. What
he's describing is an interesting situation, and you too. Because if we take the instance of a doctor, okay, a doctor is supposed to be an authoritarian thinker, and the doctor is supposed to know. Therefore, when the doctor would interact with either of you, he'd say, here, I want it fixed, just fix it. He won't allow you to do the detailed fact finder you need to do to actually diagnose what you should do and fix this problem. And it's a problem in this society of a little bit of intellectual arrogance. We have to break down, because actually you guys should be able to go out and do your job on a consultative basis, and you should first of all start out by asking tons and tons of questions. Do a detailed fact finder and just give the whole layout, and then you can make a proper diagnosis, and then you can do a proper treatment. But until you do that, if they just say, okay, you're the tech guy, just fix it, okay? They haven't taken the time to go ahead and actually figure out what their problem is. And they think they're looking for you to do some type of magic. It's not going to work until we have a better community dialogue.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm talking about, is about society, working with society generally speaking, is that, you can go out of your way to be an open-minded type person, but there are issues in our culture where people, don't listen to one another. And this gets beyond, education. This gets to, it's an issue that I work in now I work in community work up in Cleveland Heights, and it's an issue that we have about, they have a whole civility project up there about, it's a bunch of people who got together and asked, why is it that, it seems so rude nowadays walking down the street? What can we do about it? And so, I mean, that's another, just getting out into the culture and saying, hey, the way that we're interacting, apart from being unpleasant, is also unhelpful. And frankly, I'm working in the middle of it right now, and I have no idea what the hell to do. So, I mean, there's some questions that I don't have the answer to. And, how to promote just on a broad level people being nice to one another and respecting each other and working with somebody rather than telling them what to do. It's a good question. I don't have the answer to that one. Okay, you haven't asked me yet.
I'm just going to comment that I'm a technical trainer in networking and security, and I have a half dozen trainers I manage. And oftentimes, whenever we get the opportunity, we end up with an end user trainer or something in our other division and gets sick. I'll send one of those guys over for a day to teach, intro to Word. And it amazes them to sit down and watch somebody who is just awed by copy and paste. Because we get kind of jaded in what we do, because we're used to dealing with it on our level.